Terry, we appreciate you being on the show. This is exciting. I was trying to think, have you and I ever been together? Like, have we met face to face at some point
Ryan, I
somewhere?
don't think so. I mean, I know of you and obviously your stint with 3 Olympiads and your national championship at BYU. And I know you were player of the year. And so I mean, that, but I don't think we've ever met. So,
Yeah. Well, this is great. It's good to get to know you. And I know we obviously know a lot of the same people. Volleyball, the community, as you know, is relatively small. And so it'll be good to kind of tell some stories about our own individual journeys. But let's start there with you, because I'm curious. Tell me a little bit about your journey in the sport of volleyball. When did you start? Why did you start? And then let's build
well,
off from there.
it's a circuitous kind of journey. I grew up in the Ukrainian community in Chicago, still called the Ukrainian Village there. And
Huh.
I came here when I was 3, and the sports I played were table tennis, tennis, and soccer, and played soccer at a high level, played in the major division in Chicago when I was, like 17, 18. But the guys that I play on the East Coast in soccer played volleyball. And they would always say to me, Terry, you ought to play volleyball. And I go, volleyball? My sister plays volleyball. I mean, but they were like Gene and Walt Chizevich, and Gene later became the USA national coach for the USA men's soccer team. But they were really, they played both. And so I got into it one summer and really started playing a lot on the beach. At that time, it was Oak Street Beach in Chicago. And then I played on this little Chicago Ukrainians team. I'm a little over 6 foot, so this is the 60s. I was a middle blocker, so you can laugh at that.
You were the tall guy.
then I kind of would always play against the people, Jim Vineyard, Bruno Andrikaitis, that played for Jim Coleman's club team. Both were on the national team for a while. And so they'd say, hey, you got to go out for Kenneth Allen. So I went and made the Kenneth Allen team that Jim Coleman was the coach of. And I was a pre-med biology major. So now I was going to medical school at Loyola Stritch in Chicago. So I quit med school to play volleyball and to be Jim's assistant at George Williams College.
I'm sure your parents love that.
No, my Eastern European parents love that. So I just kind of went hook, line, and sinker. And it was very interesting for me because I had never had a physical education class undergrad. And here I was trying to get a master's in physical education. And the chairman of the department, who was the AD chairman at the little college, George Williams, Brad Rothermel, he said he spent an hour trying to dissuade me to quit med school. So he was saying, what are you doing? And then he kind of he outlined this course for the summer. He said, I'm going to give you 18 books. If you read those, we'll kind of satisfy your undergraduate. So he and I are dear friends. I still keep in touch with Brad once every 3 weeks since 1971, Wow. So he's retired. And so that's how it started. So I was Jim's assistant, played on the Kenneth Allen team. Then we had a great team at George Williams. It was the NAIA champion. In fact, we beat San Diego State. We were 1-1 against San Diego State the year that they won the national championship. Wow. So the teams with Duncan McFarland and Chris Marlowe and Beacons and Wayne Gracie, those a really good team.
Yeah.
So then I went to Ohio State coaching men, working on my doctorate, and just had some really good teams there. 3 of those guys played on the men's gold medal team in 1984. Aldous Berezins, Mark Waldy, and Rich DeWellius. And then Title IX came about. So, and I just finished my PhD, and Ohio State did not hire their own PhDs. And I wasn't sure whether I wanted to coach and teach or both. So I said, Title IX, hey, the landscape is going to change. There's going to be very few jobs in men's volleyball. And I was offered the head job at Long Beach State for men.
Oh, really?
Wow. But there was a job opening at Pacific in Stockton. It was a Division III 1-year-old program for women. And I was a teacher hired in the academic track, but I could have chosen to coach women's tennis, women's soccer, or women's volleyball. So I went there. It was D3 1-year-old. We went D1. And, the rest is history. We really got good. We went to the first Final Four in '79 in Division I. I went to 5 Final Fours, lost in the semis twice in the 5th set. Lost in the championship in 1980 to USC. And then John Dunning took I became the national coach in 85, right. 84, 85. John Dunning took my place at Pacific and won 2 national championships the first 2 years. He had never coached in college. So anyway, that's kind of that fast forward to, hey, I spent 12 years with the national team, 3 Olympiads, and it was a humbling experience because that from being on the national team, it's a lot of hard work. And, we inherited a program that won a silver medal, but everybody retired. So we started from scratch. And Ryan, I say this to people, our first competition in February of 1985, the national USA women's team, we played the number 3 Korean club team, not the national team, the number 3 Korean club team. We played 7 matches and did not win a set.
Oh my gosh. So you had a long way to go.
But from 85 to 95, where we were ranked number 1 in the world, it became, but that was, I'm a builder, and I've always been a builder, and I understand that. And, it was a great, as honor, privilege to coach for the United States, coach great athletes. And it's a real different level, as because man, everybody's good. And now what's the role definition of the players, and how do you get somebody that had 50 sets a match in college, but they're not starting, right. So it's a whole different world. But hey, volleyball's been great to me. And then I took 10 years off to see my kids grow up, because my kids were 9 and 12 when I retired. And I said, I'm staying home here in San Diego to watch him. And when they leave, when my son left to the University of Chicago, he's the older one. And then when my daughter was going to Wisconsin to play soccer, that's when I decided I'm going to go back and coach at Oregon State. So I did that, but I'm not sure that was the smart thing to do, because we had no concept of early recruiting. It was just a whole different landscape. Club volleyball has now, boomed since it, I remember I left in 1984. So from 84 to 2005 is 20 years. And I had a good time. We got to be competitive. We went to the Sweet 16 one year. So, but it's been great to me. And now with the art of coaching, it's been a lot of fun working with John and working with Russ Rose. And, Russ was in my physical education biomechanics class in 1972 as a baseball catcher with a ponytail. So
he loves you telling that story.
Jim and I convinced him to go out for volleyball. The rest is history. Funny. I mean, he's a great coach and obviously a great friend, and he's done a great job at Penn State. So,
Holy cow. You can say that's an understatement. I'm curious. So you just kind of laid out a little bit of the journey that you've had. What are some of the most important things that you learned being a coach during that time? Are there things that stand out that really shaped you as an individual? Things that you've
Ryan, that's a great question. One thing, as you get older, you reflect more, obviously. But I know that you've got to be a learner, and that's one of the things that I've always. Hey, show me. I'd always tell that to my staff. If you could convince me that what I'm doing is wrong, let's do it your way, because I just want to be the best that I can be. So being a constant learner. Also, I found out very early, and I was always smart about this, that the most important ingredient of coaching success is the athletic talent of your team. And you got to understand that. You can't make chicken salad out of chicken crap. That's just reality. So you've got to know how to identify talent. But then I think, as we said earlier, working with top athletes, hey, now it becomes, what's the role definition for that athlete? How do you make him or her feel part of the team if they're a starter and the best player, or if they're just somebody that's a bench player? And those are things that became important. And when I became the national coach, I never thought about this. That first team in 85, we had a player from Stanford that was a 3-sport athlete, basketball, track, and volleyball. And so she comes up to me and says, "Coach, can I ask you a question?" I said, "Sure." She says, "What does a substitute do?" And I go, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Since age 5, I've never been a substitute in a sport ever. So I'm just trying to learn, what should I do in preparing for the match? What do I do on the bench?" I said, "That's a great question." So then, you start thinking, hey, I should have thought of this earlier, even with my bench players in college,
Right.
like, hey, how do I teach them to be a good bench player?
Yeah.
And, part of the other thing is that this is kind of a credo that I have, is that one person's bullshit is another person's catechism. So you got to understand what's important to somebody else may not be important to me, but hey, in the country we live in, that person needs to express their opinion and do it the way they want to do it. There's no right or wrong way, and it has to be within the personality and philosophy of the coach. And there's a lot of different ways to coach. And that's why we started the Art of Coaching. We felt that there's a lot of different ways to coach. Coaches are successful not just by doing one thing.
Right.
And so that's
some good nuggets there.
Tidbits.
The substitute, the role of the substitute was interesting. And it reminded me of Tom Hoff. So Tom Hoff was also a 3-time Olympian. He was with us in the gold medal run in Beijing. But in Beijing, his role had shifted a little bit because he was now coming off the bench as the third middle. But he was also our team captain. And I think if you asked any of those guys, what was a major influencing factor on the success of that team, a lot of us would point to his leadership as a player, team coach, player, team captain, but not being somebody that's a team captain that's consistently playing all the time. His leadership was really shining through in the moments in preparation, practice. I mean, he would always come, give his 100%, even though he probably knew at that point of his career that he wasn't, at the level that he was a little bit before. But he also realized that what he was doing from being a leader and being a team captain was hypercritical. And so he put a ton of effort in ensuring that he was the best captain that he could be, holding guys accountable appropriately in practice, making sure that everybody knew that this was the way we were going to do things.
Yeah,
we weren't going to slack off. It was going to everyone was going to give their all. When we were ready to roll, we were ready to roll. And he helped us execute to a high degree. I think if you ask Hugh, who was coaching us at that time, did Tom help you kind of run that team from a player dynamic? He would say absolutely. I mean, maybe we wouldn't have gotten where we got without Tom's leadership.
Well, Ryan, just what you said is so important for coaches to know, is that I had the pleasure of knowing Bill Walsh, and I met Bill when he became the head coach at Stanford in 1977, and then followed him through his career. And on my shelf is his book, Finding the Winning Edge, inscribed to me. He would always say to me a couple of things. He'd say, "Terry, once your players, and especially your good players, wrest the control of the locker room away from you, you're going to have a great team." And he said that, hey, Ronnie Lott, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, hey, they ran the locker room, but they were also the hardest workers, and they were also very accountable. So when the hardest worker comes to you and says, this is what we're going to do, you're going to listen. Or if a captain that has had that, hey, Tom had his great years prior to that, but probably, like you said, his leadership, or, one of the best captains I had was my first year at Ohio State, my Ohio State captain, Tony Gaines, 5th-year senior, married. I found out years later, like in our 10th year, 20th reunion, I remember the freshmen that were freshmen when Tony's in his 5th year would say, Gaines would come to my dorm and say, "Drew, you're not working hard enough. You don't work hard enough in practice tomorrow, I'm going to kick your ass." And I didn't even know that was going on, but that kind of leadership is critical for one of the great books is Legacy. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's about the All Blacks, the New Zealand rugby team.
Right.
And it's a leadership book. And the first book is called first chapter, Sweeping the Sheds, where at the end of every home game, as soon as everybody leaves, the captains clean the locker room. And, it's back to that servant leader, and it's like,
Yeah.
I think that's a critical aspect of any team. You've got to have a great leadership group. And the other part is, every team I've coached, there's 4 or 5 key players that they really know what's going on. They're the ones that are most committed. They're the ones that really bought into the system. They're going to make everybody else accountable. You can find roles for the other 7 or 8, but if you don't have that 4 or 5 that are committed to the way you're coaching, committed to the system, committed to being the best that they can be, you're not going to get anywhere. So
let me shift your focus a little bit here. In your eyes, you've coached a lot of different players, a lot of good players, a lot of great players. What separates in your eyes the good players from the great players? What were the intangibles of the people that you knew that were going to go on and do great things because they had something? I don't know. Did they have something else? Can everybody be a great player? Or it's a question that I get a lot as well, is what separated you from other guys that were doing the same things you were doing? How come you took your game to another level while someone else who you would look at kind of have the same tools didn't allow themselves to get to that level?
Well, to answer it in a little bit different way, every player has the potential to be as good as they can be.
Okay.
Now, the other part is that's potential, and potential means you're crappy now,
Right.
But if you have the physical skills, there's a lot of innate God-given things that none of us control, whether it's speed, height, visual acuity.
I tell people all the time, you can't teach 6'8". So
exactly.
I just was 6'8". So,
but Ryan, that's the old Japanese saying. They used to say that all the time. They used to say, "I can teach a tall player to play volleyball, but I can't teach you to be tall."
Yeah, exactly right.
No, so those are, and so then there may be a lot of other 6'8" or 6'7" or 6'10" players, but they didn't maximize their potential.
That's right.
So that, I think, is the ability to work hard and the ability, in my mind, to be resilient. Because, I love hiring athletes in business, not because they win, but because they know how to pick themselves up after every athlete has failed. Every coach has failed. If you coach long enough, you'll be 500. That's kind of the way I look at it, and so you got to know that, hey, the sun's going to rise tomorrow. What am I going to do to get better the next day? The most painful lessons you learn is when you lose, not when you win. And those are ones that if you use them in the right way, you're gonna be good. And obviously, so much goes into it. Think of your run in Beijing. I mean, think of a point here and there, a call here and there, a great play here and there. At the highest levels that you've played, you know that a match is decided by 3-4 different swings of points or whatever. And that's, you see it, tennis is very much like volleyball. And that's why I grew up playing tennis. I love tennis. You watch the great ones. In our lifetime, we're lucky that there's a Nadal, Federer, and Djokovic. You watch them in those matches. There's 1 or 2 plays. Everything else is even. So, but those are players that have maximized their physical abilities. And I've coached a lot of people that have, probably the best that I've coached that, were either All-Americans or really top international players. Some of them were way overachievers. It wasn't as much the innate talent as they pushed themselves to the max. Mm-hmm. And they had a work ethic. They never settled for, they would do extra. They were learners, and they didn't get down on themselves when they failed. They get themselves up and say, hey, here's my next goal. And the other part is work ethic. To me, I always say this, my father said this when I was a young guy, and he'd say, hey, this is a great country. He said, if you work hard, anything is possible. He said, but understand, he'd say to me, Taras, understand, if you work hard, you may never get what you want. But if you don't work hard, you'll never get there.
Yeah.
So, that's the whole thing. You've got to, you may work really hard and you may not get what you want, but you'll never get what you want if you really don't pay the effort. And Mark Cuban has a great statement about that when they ask him about, has he learned something in life, in business, that's important. He says, yes, one thing, there are no shortcuts. And anybody who thinks there is, you don't get where you're at by just being 6'8". I mean, yeah, that helps, but there's a lot of 6'8" guys that don't get there.
Totally agree.
That's just the reality. So,
you hit on something that has impacted me quite substantially. So when I retired, right before the London Games in 2012, I didn't know what my next path was going to be. I didn't know what I was going to do. It was logical for me to get into coaching because I had a coaching background. I had coached a year at BYU, coached the men's team in 2006 at BYU after taking a little bit of break from playing overseas. So I was looking into that. I had some opportunities to get into the coaching realm, but a good friend of mine that I've known a long time, we would bump into each other every once in a while, and we just so happened to bump into each other during this kind of transition period. And he said, "What are you doing now that you're retired?" And I said, "You know what? I'm kind of looking for the next chapter." And he said, "You should come talk to me about what I do." And so I work as a global management consultant. And so I ended up going and meeting the founders of our firm. And it was a little bit of what you talked about. They had their eye on hiring a super high level athlete because of the different things that I had experienced and how those experiences transition or transferred into good business sense. And going in and helping organizations on how to be more effective teamwork, how to have their teams work better, or how to be better leaders, or how to increase or generate greater accountability within their workforce. Because I've had all these different experiences that have allowed me and taught me all these different things, trying to compete and be the best. And it's really been beneficial because I went into this role without having a business background. I had no sales background. I didn't have an MBA, which is what they're typical. You think of a consultant, you think of somebody that's got all this business experience.
Yeah.
But what they were looking for is somebody that had more life experience, particularly as it pertains to getting to a pinnacle of something. Mm-hmm. So you've helped the team reach the pinnacle of something. So you obviously have something that, a lot of people haven't ever experienced. And we think that experience can translate really well into this consulting role. And I've been in the role now for almost 8 years. And it's been going really well. Now, is it
it's a business, so you're consulting for businesses.
That's right.
So leadership, that's great.
It is. We go in and we help organizations more effectively manage their culture. So that's the emphasis of our coaching, of our consulting.
Yeah, that's what Pete Carroll does. He's a good friend of mine. His wife was my first team captain at Pacific. So funny. Pete was a grad student when I first got there. He was the defensive backs graduate student coach. So we've kept in touch for 45 years. But that's what he does for Boeing, for Microsoft, with Michael Gervais and Compete to Create. But he'd always say to me, "Hey, you got to get into the business thing." But because, like he said, people need help in business because they've never really been part of teams, or especially engineers that have a hard time, hey, because I'm the smartest guy in the room,
So true.
No. That's great. That's congratulations in doing that.
So I want to touch on something that you mentioned about you're kind of a grower, right? You kind of took programs from the get-go. So for people that are out there in those same types of roles where you're put into coaching positions where you need to grow and develop a team, what were some of the major focus areas in the ability to grow? Were there things where did you have a framework where you're like, okay,
I think framework and a plan, I think you almost have to say, where do I want to be 5 years from now? And you have to have that vision, and then you've got to work backwards to just kind of say, what are my steps to get there? And I think my thing has always started with people, whether it be, having good athletes, but also having really good staff people. And I had this saying that if anybody comes and says, I want to help your program or work with you, I'll find a job for you. And so those are ways that, and I always got people kind of excited about projects or about goals. Like when I was hired at Pacific, I remember telling the athletic director then was Cedric Dempsey, that later became the head of the NCAA. And he said, so what do you want to do here? I said, I want to build a national champion, and they kind of looked at me and he said, Division III, 1-year-old, But then what happened is, because of the force of that vision, we started doing a lot of things to get the team better. And those were different days because there were no restrictions on how much you can train, which I think that's the way it should be. You know, like, and it should be related to your grade point average. If I'm a good student, you know, hey, if I'm a classical pianist, you're going to say you can only play 8 hours. Now you got to stop. That's ridiculous. You know, I mean, to me, the NCAA is ridiculous anyway as an organization. But the thing is that that really helped. I had right away we started having these things. You know, like I had these monikers. Come once, you'll come back, about volleyball, the best show in town. And then we grew it, and we grew it to the point where it became an unbelievable, you know, we had the Wendy's Classic, which was always in November, and it was us, UCLA, and the next top 2 teams that year. So we had 7,000 a night, standing room only in this arena. And so it grew to the point where we were averaging in 1983-84, 3,500 people a game, 1,200 season ticket holders. And I became then the AD in charge of marketing for all the sports, football, basketball, baseball. But I think that's what I'm trying to say. What's your vision? How do you get there? And the stepping stones is for sure teaching skill. You've got to get good athletes to learn the skill, because it's irrelevant to work on tactics or on physical conditioning or even the mental if you don't have the skill. And I always say that to people that, okay, I'm going to visualize, and visualization, as you know, is very important, but I'm going to visualize that I'm going to jump 7 feet. Well, that's going to be good if I'm jumping 6'10" or 6'11". If I'm jumping 5'5", like I am probably right now, if that, it's not helping me. You know, so same thing in volleyball. I've got to teach, you know, I was a really good skill trainer to get people to become good servers, passers, hitters, you know, blockers. So that was where I really concentrated and put my efforts in. And then I learned something very quickly that I said earlier, that I had a coach. She was the captain of the 64 and the 68 Olympic team, Jane Ward, one of the great players of all time. And she was then coaching at San Jose State. So my second year at Pacific, Jane came to me, and I had known her before, but she came to me and says, Terry, I'm watching what you're doing. Keep repeating what you're doing. Keep saying things over and over again, because between junior and senior year, the light bulb will go on for anywhere from 4 to 5 of them. For the rest, the light bulb will never go on, but you only need 4 or 5 to be great. And that was true. So you had to have that core, back to that buy-in of the 4 or 5 core players.
Right.
And hopefully that's your leadership group. And so I've always been able to kind of round that out in all the teams I was at. So vision, obviously got to spend the time of hard work, where coaches that get into it that were former players that don't understand that, hey, I showed up to practice and there was a practice plan, and yes, I conditioned, I worked hard at practice, but then I'm off. The coach, they're running practice, they're planning practice, they're getting ready for the next practice.
Right.
You know that because you coach. There's a lot that goes into it. So the hard work that comes back into it. And then the other is that I think you just have to have a system that you create for the team that you have, not fit players into a system. You can do that if you're like, you know, the Cuban women were one of the best teams in the world for many, many years. Won 3 Olympics in a row. But their coaches, Eugenio George and Nico Perdomo, they coached that team for 37 years.
Wow.
So therefore, you can fit players into a system. You know, you have a system, and you can almost have a cutout. You know, you're playing a 6-2, you're receiving with 4 or 5. That's what they always did. And that's what they always did, you know. So I think you've got to be smart designing a system for what you have. And we're notorious copiers in volleyball. And sometimes people, like, you know, right now everybody's the quick set to the outside. Right. Well, that's great if you have a great setter that can set the ball, and if you can dig and pass the ball to the setter. And then I tell people all the time, do you know if you have a quick go set to your pin hitter, there's only one shot that she or he can hit, and that's angle. You can't hit down the line on a go set, you know. So let's think about that, you know. But we're copiers, you know. We're playing a 5-1, everybody's playing a 5-1. Then somebody plays a 6-2 and they're successful, everybody plays a 6-2. It's kind of funny that way. So
it is.
but so those are just some things. And, you know, there's a lot of we go back to serendipity and being in the right place at the right time.
Sure.
Hey, I came to Pacific. They had no concept of volleyball. It was the right place, the right time. The other ingredient, Stockton YMCA was the national open champion in 1955 and 56 in the United States. And three of those guys that were starters on that team, Bud Klein, Bob Klinger, and Wigley, were millionaires. And they really helped the program. You know, they helped me. The treasurer of the USVBA, Leonard Gibson, lived in Stockton. He was their coach. And he knew me when I was the assistant. I was Ari Selinger's first assistant in 75. So that's where I met Gibby. So when Gibby knew that I wanted to go to Stockton, he said, hey, these guys are going to help you. And they were great. Wow. You know, they helped the program. So we never could have built that program without them. Yeah. They even instituted, they wanted to have a men's team when I was there, but the school wouldn't go for it at that time. And we were going to hire Marv. Marv was finishing his doctorate at BYU at that time before he came back to Pepperdine. Yep. So anyway, that's the serendipity. Those guys were there. I was there. They kind of let me, one of the things that I think is probably most important is that I had some goals and I wouldn't let anything deter those goals. Yeah, I'm going to build a national champion caliber team. So that became a focus. If I just said, hey, I want to be 500, you know, it's like if I aim for a C, I'm not going to get an A, you know.
You're going to get a C, most likely.
Or maybe a D. Yeah.
When you talked about having the 7,000 people, was that in the Pacific Arena, the domed arena?
Yeah, standing room only. That arena sits 5,500. So yeah.
So when I was playing in college, we would go play at Pacific and we would play there. Unfortunately, their fan base for the men's team was non-existent. In fact, there'd maybe be 100 Pacific fans and then probably like 400 or 500 BYU fans. And we would just immediately drown out all the Pacific fans, even on the home court. But I remember one match when we were playing and, you know, Pacific was kind of an up and coming team and we were a lot better than they were. And we were just going to get ready to we were going to beat them down, you know? And so Carl, both of our good friend Carl, so there's one side of the arena where no one was sitting except this one woman. And she was up probably about the 7th or 8th row and she had a megaphone. And the arena, as you know, when there's not a lot of people in it, it echoes really loud and the acoustics are pretty good. So she was there the whole game. Didn't matter what the score was, what was going on. And she was laying into Carl so bad about what a horrible coach he was. And that was a terrible coaching decision. And coach, you need a timeout. And McGowan, you're blowing it. And we're up by, it's like, I don't even remember the score. It's like 13-3. And she's all, McGowan, you're blowing it. So I remember we were in the third set. We won the first two. I think it was probably like 8-5, 9-5. We were rolling. Carl takes a really strange timeout because we had just scored like 2 in a row and he calls a timeout and we're like, Carl, what's going on? And he goes, guys, I just got to tell you, like, she's in my head. I can't coach anymore. This lady is completely taking me out of my game. And we thought it was so funny because she'd just been heckling him the whole game. It was hilarious.
That's funny. That arena was actually very much positioned for volleyball. You know,
oh, really? I liked playing there.
I was on that committee that designed the building, the Spano Center, but because that was only built in 81 was the first year we played in there. Yeah. And it was standing room only because that seats like 5,500, close to 6,000. Oh yeah, we had it rocking. You know, cool. There were some unbelievable matches. I mean, I remember a lot of 5-set championships for the Wendy's between us, Hawaii, or us at RSC, or us at UCLA. It was great, you know. So
that's great.
And UCLA at that time had a tournament 2 weeks before that called the NIBT for women, which was 24 teams, all the top 20 teams in that weekend. Oh, and wow. You played on 6 courts, and you played on 4 courts, 6 teams in each pool. Yeah. And in a 2-day period, you'd play round robin, quarterfinals, finals.
Yeah.
So yeah,
That
and
reminds me of the old Santa Barbara Invitational. For the men, we used to
yeah,
have the
yeah,
Santa Barbara tournament
very
that
much
all
like
the
that.
best teams would go to, kind of
Yeah.
preseason to get ready for it. And you're the same. You'd have all the best Division I teams. Some club teams would come too. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, we always felt, Andy Banikowski and I talked about this a lot, that winning the NIBT and then winning the Windies, and a lot of us did that. Like we won the NIBT 3 years in a row, and I think it cost us in the NCAA because you really play so hard in those 2 weekends in November. Come the end of November, you're getting to the playoffs, and the first 2 rounds are pretty easy. But then when you get to the third and fourth round, you're tired. You're
Right.
physically drained.
Yeah.
You've played some great volleyball too early.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell everyone about the art of coaching, Total Sports. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. You
Yeah,
mentioned it a little bit.
Ryan, what happened, I was at Oregon State, and Russ and John, we go way back. Russ was in my physical education class back in 1971 at George Williams College, and we convinced him to go out to volleyball. So we've always been friends for 47, 48 years. And then John was a math teacher, basketball coach, volleyball coach, quit at Fremont High School. John took a clinic with me at Pacific in 1977 and slept in his car. That's where we met. And then he replaced me at Pacific, never having coached in college, but he had a club team that was one of the best, Bay Club, and Fremont High School won the CIF championship. And so we go way back. And so they approached me in like 2009 and said, hey, we need to do some clinics. You used to do clinics in the past. Let's do some clinics. There's this gold medal square. They're saying there's only one way to do that. And I always used to laugh at Carl because Carl was a good friend and a great coach. But I'd say, Carl, I thought you were a Mormon. He said, I am. You've started another religion. You got these people, go, if
it's
you
a
don't
good way
play
of
it.
describing it.
No, I'm saying you got to be kidding me, but anyway, so I said, I'm not that interested in a clinic, but let's do a clinic, but I'm interested in a website, I told them. So we did a clinic in 2011. It was successful, and we've done 48 clinics since. We averaged 280 coaches a clinic.
Yeah.
But then we created this website, and it's got great traction. We have 70,000 members on our at our website. We have over 10,000 premium members. So it's been kind of fun doing that. And, our moniker right away was that there's a lot of different ways to coach, and let's get a lot of different opinions. And I've offered, hey, always, I have good friends that are gold medal squared coaches that are very good coaches.
I'm sure.
Jason Watson is a very good friend of mine. So I'd say, Jason, I want you to get on Art of Coaching. Tell us what So that was kind of how we started, and we've survived this pandemic, which has been tough because we luckily have a virtual presence.
Yeah,
only
that's what I was going to say. With the website, are you pumping in?
Of our business is the live clinics. Yeah.
But with the website, it gives you an ability to kind of pump in additional content through video and digital and
video, right? So we have we have 5,000 different videos on our website. A lot of whether it be blogs or PDFs or practice plans, and it's a consortium. Like we've had probably now about 140 top coaches that have either presented at our clinics. Really, the who's, Hughes presented at our clinics, Kevin Hambley, but also we've lots of top people. So there's a lot of different viewpoints, and there's a lot of different ways that people approach coaching, and I think it's always good. And I think, my theory has always been, Ryan, that we as a country have disenfranchised the high schools because of club. And see, I've always argued that sport in America is, if you're a sport that is meaningful in the United States, you have a pro college high school component. Right. Take football, basketball, even baseball, even though that they have the minor leagues. And I think club has become so big in volleyball that it's disenfranchised the high schools. So a lot of our constituents are high schools because the high schools aren't going away. Right. So there's 17, 18,000 both boys and girls high schools combined that play volleyball. So it's been fun, and we're kind of embarking on some new initiatives going forward that we're going to announce. We're going to get into player wellness, which is, I think, a big thing.
Yeah.
And I think particularly through COVID now, and through even the stuff with race and racial inequity, there's a lot of angst in the world. And I think athletes are also people, and you've got to address those issues, whether it's, preventing injury, smart training, mental wellness is a key component. So all of that's important. So
that's great. Good for you guys being on the forefront of that.
Yeah.
All right, Terry, I want to ask you, I want to kind of go into a little bit of a lightning round where I'll just ask you a few questions. These are kind of short answers as much as you can, whatever. I mean, the answer is yours, but they're meant to be kind of short, rapid fire questions. Let's say, so the first one, what's something that not a lot of people know about you? Is there anything that stands out?
Probably that I'm more of an introvert that people would think, that I like to spend time alone and away from people. I like reading, so I'm more of an introvert than people think.
Okay, that's good. I like that. How about this? What's a trait that you most dislike about yourself? Is anything that you're just like, I wish?
Yeah, I probably am going to be too frank at times.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to tell you something that I should have just probably not said, but that's a fault that, I was a lot worse when I was 18 to 27. You'll laugh at this, Ryan. My first job interview with USA Volleyball was 1974. They were hiring a national training director, and I was still playing at that time. And they'd say, "So what do the players think of USA Volleyball?" I said, they think it's a crappy organization. And they'd say, "Well, why would you want to work here?" I'd say, "It wouldn't take much to make it better."
I wonder if they didn't like that response, or if they thought, you know what, at least
I don't know.
honest.
I didn't get the job. So
yeah, there you go. How about the flip side? What's a trait that you most dislike in others? Does anything bother you?
Yeah,
really bad?
If you're not dependable, reliable.
Yeah.
I think
people that are dependable.
There's I said this to my kids growing up. When I was young, I thought the world was 50-50, 50% reliable, 50% unreliable. As I got older, I found out that it's 90% unreliable, 10% reliable. So if you find somebody who's dependable, reliable, hang on to them. And those are people you want to work with. And it's like, hey, if you say something, and all of us are human, we're going to make mistakes, then own up to it. Say, hey, I missed that phone call. Sorry, I forgot. Great.
Right.
Instead of, hey,
Yeah.
So dependability, reliability.
If you never got into coaching volleyball, what would you be doing right now?
I'd probably be a medical doctor. I don't know.
That's a good one for you.
That was, yeah.
What kind of medicine were you going to go into?
I was just 1 year in med school.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't really sure, and it was a tough time. It was the height of the Vietnam War. This was 1969, 70. Loyola was right next to a brand new VA hospital. They made freshmen go on rounds, which was great because, when I went into those hospitals, I said, what am I doing here? So who knows? I probably would have stayed there.
Yeah. So dream vacation, where are you going?
Wow. New Zealand.
Yeah.
It's a country I've never been to. I've been to Australia
really?
many, many, many times because I consulted there, but I always had a dream as a young kid to go to New Zealand. So that's still my dream vacation.
Man, oh man, we had an opportunity to go to New Zealand my first year at BYU. After my first year, we get to go on these. Before we got to go on these super trips, and Hugh was our coach, and he said, guys, we should go to New Zealand. I'll show you all around. And we spent 3 weeks. We drove 2 VW buses from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the South Island. I think we played 4 matches against the New Zealand national team in those 3 weeks. So it was the rest of the time we were just hanging out, checking everything. It's beautiful there. That's a good one.
Yeah.
Let's see. last meal on earth, it's the last meal. What are you having? What's on your plate?
I'd say if it's the last meal, I'd resurrect my mom and make her make some good Ukrainian pyrohe, and stuffed cabbage. That would probably be what I'd go after.
Nice. I like that response. How about what's the last movie that made you tear up that you watched or show?
I tear up on a lot of them. I like the, that's the other thing. I love film. I will love watching films, but, I watched one recently that really pulled at my heartstrings in a different way, because I made a conscious effort in these last 2 months to say, I think I'm pretty knowledgeable about race relations, and I found out how not knowledgeable I am,
like
because
many of us.
I'm looking at it as a white person, but,
right.
I watched, I really, one of my favorite books in life is the autobiography of Malcolm X. But I watched Malcolm X, the movie, but there was a documentary, a 1972 documentary on Malcolm X, and just hearing him speak and talk. And here's a guy that, was killed at age 40, and the life he lived, the transformational life of being a drug dealer, pimp, and then going to jail, and then coming out, and then having a lovely family, and then his last talk, he gets killed right in front of his family.
Right.
I mean, that kind of pulled on some of the heartstrings for me. So
wow. Well, Terry, appreciate you taking the time. This has been great. I hope it's not the last time we connect.
No, Ryan, I'd like to know more about what you do. That's really interesting me, and I hope we get you've got my number. You get
I'm going to be down in your area really soon.
No. We'll spend some time. I'd love to get to know you, and once we can get away from that, we can do some non-social distancing.
Exactly right. Tell everybody where they can go to learn more about the art of coaching.
Art of coaching, if you go to just the artofcoachingvolleyball.com, you'll get everything about our website. We also have the artofcoachingsoftball.com.
Oh, cool.
And we also dabbled a little bit in football and baseball, but those are the main two, volleyball and softball. So the artofcoachingvolleyball.com will give you everything we have there. So that's
great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Like I said, let's stay in touch, and good luck with everything.
It's always nice establishing a new relationship. I wish you and your family all the best, safe, healthy, and keep doing what you're doing. Obviously, you've been successful, and just keep at it.
All right. Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome. See you later, Ryan. Take care.
Bye-bye.